What's going on, everybody? Welcome into another episode of the Better Fantasy Football Show. I'm your host, Will Ty. I'm so excited today to be joined by my good buddy and also a really good fantasy analyst, Rob from Dad Bod Fantasy Squad. What's going on, dude?
What's up, Will, man? How you doing? It's been fun, dude. This past week we were talking about it a little bit. You're getting all the camp news. You're seeing everything coming out. This is a fun time to be back into the fantasy football world.
It's fantasy season, man. Like draft. People are starting to nail down their draft dates. Everything's starting to fall into place. Training camp's starting, and so now our job as fantasy analysts is to give everybody some really good information, some really good takes on these different players. And so I'm really happy to have you on because I do respect you as a voice of the industry, and specifically so the AFC North, which is the division we're going to be covering today. You are.
That's right. I got my Ohio hat on. We're ready to roll. We're talking some AFC North, so. Nothing better.
I love it too. Before we get into it, and hopefully we don't digress too much here, but give us a day in the life of a Browns fan. What's it like?
Oh, day in the life of a Browns fan, huh? So just, I'm 31, okay? And in my time since I've been a Browns fan, I've seen one playoff victory and a ton of miserable seasons. I've seen more top 5 picks than I think most NFL teams has seen, in the last 15 years. It's been a very, very tough go of it lately. I mean, and then you factor in, right, we draft Baker Mayfield with the number 1 overall pick. It seems like everything's going in the right way, and then that falls apart. And then we go out and we trade for Deshaun Watson, who I love, right? I love the player. Let's go there.
Good clarifying.
I love the player. But now, we have been we can't walk down the street without getting yelled at now because we have Deshaun Watson. So we go from maybe the most, I don't want to say beloved franchise team, I guess maybe the most, people felt bad for us. And now we're going into everyone hates us. So we just can't win, man. No matter what we do, we're just one of those teams that it seems like there's a dark cloud over us at all times. And at some point you just embrace it and you go with it. So I'm going with it.
I love it, man. Well, things are pointing up for you guys from a football perspective, I think. We'll get to the Browns a little bit later. But what we're going to do here, guys, is we're going to be doing a preview for pretty much every fantasy-relevant player in the AFC North. And big thanks to Rob and big thanks to the Dad Bod Fantasy Squad for joining us today. What we're going to do here is we're just going to do a simple ADP check on each of these players. We're going to give a quick take on them. I'm going to ask Rob if he's feeling or fading them at their current ADP, sort of a nod to Matt Waldman and Bob Harris's segment, the Feel It or Fuck It segment. So really love what they do. Obviously, that's a quick plug for them.
I like that. That.
Matt Waldman, also local Cleveland guy, like us, Rob. So pretty cool.
Okay.
But I digress. So let's jump into it. Starting with the Bengals. Obviously, we're recording this the day after the Joe Burrow camp injury. So thankfully, it's not as bad as it seems. Could have been a lot worse. Obviously, you hear non-contact, cart being wheeled out, and then you see Joe Burrow, and you're like, what the fuck? Like, this is brutal.
And you saw the clip, right? You see the clip. It looks scary. But hopefully everything's okay.
I love it. Yeah. Hopefully everything's okay. So with all that information, Joe Burrow, current ADP round 3, feeling or fading?
I'm fading. And I'm fading for the point that the only way he's getting into that top 3 kind of quarterback play is if he goes nuclear on the touchdowns. Now, can he do it? He's one of those players, 100%. There's no question about it. He can end up as a top 3 quarterback this season, and I'd be fine. I mean, it's gonna happen one season. Like, he will do that. He'll get 50 touchdowns one season. He's that good of a player. It's just I would much rather either wait on a quarterback that I think has some upside, or I'm going to take a rushing quarterback like a Justin Fields, somebody like that, where I'm more comfortable with what's going to happen with the floor. And especially, like you said, with that calf injury, you might get a little bit of a slow start. So I'm going to go with somebody like a Trevor Lawrence, something like that I can get in the 7th or 8th round where I can build my team up a little bit better.
I love that. I think that's a really smart way to look at it. 3rd round is pretty significant draft capital for a guy with limited rushing upside. So I think I agree with your take there. Let's go to Joe Mixon, another guy that you can get in the 3rd round. If y'all go back and listen to the Dad Bod Fantasy Squad episode that I was on, you're going to know that I love Joe Mixon. So Rob, give me your take on Mixon. Feeling or fading round 3 for Joe Mixon?
Yeah, I think it kind of depends on how my first 2 picks go. But I'm feeling it. I am. There's nothing but upside where that ADP is, right? It's kind of at his base floor is where he's being drafted right now. And if he gets some, like Samaje Perine's not there, if he gets some of that pass work that Samaje was getting, if he's that third down back, which I don't know how you don't kind of give it to him. I don't think you're going to give it to a 5th-round rookie pick. So if he's on the field 75, 80% of the snaps in this high-powered offense, we just talked about Joey Burrow does not run. He's going to get those goal line looks. I'm in. I think that ADP's just fine.
Yeah, Mixon saw career high numbers from the receiving perspective last year. 60 receptions, 441 receiving yards, career highs for him. Samaje Perine out in Denver. So theoretically, he should be picking up even more receiving work now. So we'll see. I'm definitely I'm feeling Joe Mixon at that current ADP. Jamar Chase going in the top 5 of fantasy drafts right now. Obviously, Burrow's health is going to have a big is a big variable for Jamar Chase's ADP. But how are you feeling? Let's just assume that Joe Burrow comes into the year fully healthy. Jamar Chase's current ADP is 105. Feeling or fading?
Yeah, easy smash. Easy smash at 105. I think there's a real argument that if Joe Burrow is 100% healthy, he could be the 101 off the board. He is that good, that type of player. He's come into his 3rd season in the NFL. That's where we usually see even a jump up for some of these elite talents. So I'm all in on the top 5. Again, he's a player at 101 I would consider as long as Joey Burrow's healthy.
Yeah, I love it. And going back to our Instagram, we put out some stats here, some fast facts, posts as we call them. We put out one on Jamar Chase the other day. Jamar Chase averaged a league-leading 2 red zone targets per game in 2023. That's insane. Those are insane numbers. That's going to lead to a lot of touchdown upside, obviously. So agreed there. Jamar Chase, easy smash draft in the early first round.
The amount of the sheer volume he's going to get because of that rapport he has with Joe Burrow. Joe Burrow is one of the best passers in the game. I mean, there's a realistic possibility he gets that Cooper Kupp type of work with 170 targets. And with how good and electric Jamar Chase is, we could see some sort of, he could break some records this season.
100%. I think for the next decade, Jamar Chase is liable to potentially break records every year.
He's going to break a lot of records. Is what's going to happen. Right. And it sucks as a Browns fan.
It does. But moving on to Tee Higgins, round 3 ADP, from what I'm seeing, feeling or fading Tee Higgins there in round 3?
Yeah, for me, I've always had this thing with T. I just am very uncomfortable drafting him, so I usually fade him unless he falls to me where I get him at a steal at ADP. Like if he's there in the back half of the 4th, I'm taking that all day. Just in the 3rd, I think there's a couple better options that I personally like. I have probably ranked a little bit higher than him. Talent-wise, he's a top 12 wide receiver in the league. He's got to deal with target share issue. We just talked about Jamar Chase. He's got to deal with Jamar Chase on the outside, eating up a ton of those targets. And can the guy stay healthy? I know I hate bringing that up that's something I do not bring up a lot. But with Tee Higgins, he's never had over 110 targets in his career. And that's all because of injuries. Now, when he's there, he's a top 12 player. But some of those games, you got to kind of bake into the fact that he might miss 3 to 4 games a season. And I want someone else at that draft capital.
Yeah, totally understood there. Totally agreed with your sentiment on Tee Higgins. A little bit easier draft capital pill to swallow. Tyler Boyd going in the 11th round. You feeling or fading Tyler Boyd there in the 11th this year? I'm
feeling that. He's one of those guys that you can get. It's kind of a free play. If it doesn't work out, you drop him. But again, in this high-powered offense I just talked about Tee Higgins with some, and Jamar last season, right? We saw some injuries in this offense. Boyd comes in, he steps in as the number 2 in this offense. And with Joe Burrow, he could, even if he gives you 5 or 6 weeks at that draft capital as the wide receiver 2 in this offense, that's a steal.
100%. I love Tyler Boyd. I think he's just one of this is going to be a hot take, so I'm not trying to spend too much time on it here. But I think Amon-Ra St. Brown and Tyler Boyd are very similar players. And that's not a knock on Amon-Ra St. Brown. That's a nod to Tyler Boyd. I think he's a very, very gifted slot receiver. I think he's a savvy player. He knows where to be. I'm not saying he's as good as Amon-Ra St. Brown, but like they play a similar role. And so I'm also feeling Tyler Boyd at that ADP.
Yeah, you're not the only person that has brought that comparison up. I've seen it a few times, and it makes a lot of sense, right? But the only if Tyler Boyd was the number 1, wide receiver option in Detroit, like we could be talking about Boyd as that kind of player. And he's always steady Eddie, really reliable. He's always going to be there for you. And even if T and Jamar Chase is there, he still has some good standalone value that you could plug in for, a bye week fill-in.
Do you think it's an interesting play at all to handcuff either of those guys with Tyler Boyd, or is that stupid?
I don't go into a draft kind of thinking about handcuffing a wide receiver. If there was one that I would do it for, it would be a Tee Higgins. So if I get T, if I can snag Tyler Boyd later in the draft, I'd probably do it. Again, because I am comfortable with Tyler Boyd's standalone value, even if he's there. That's why I don't really want to call it a handcuff, but it's like a handcuff plus. Like you get a little bit extra because he doesn't need to have an injury to be decent for your team.
100%. Okay, so last guy that we'll talk about here with the Bengals, Irv Smith Jr. coming over from the Vikings. Feeling or fading his current ADP of round 15 plus, currently going pretty much undrafted. Are you?
Yeah.
Give me your interest level on Irv Smith this year.
I'm not really interested, to be honest with you. I mean, if it came down and I got Joe Burrow, if I got Joe Burrow at an ADP steal and I'm sitting at the back half of, or in round 15, like you said, where I'm debating on a tight end 2, if I want to bring in a second tight end for my team, I might bring in Irv Smith just to get a stack like that. I don't typically go into regular redraft season thinking about stacks, but he's one of those players I might bring in again with some injury issues on this team, that if Irv Smith gets you a couple weeks of good play, like it's a solid option. I think there's other tight ends even later in the draft that have higher upside, that has a path to being maybe the number 2 or 3 option as opposed to the 5th option in Cincinnati. So usually I'll go for those players where I see a better path to being like a top 2 target on their offense.
I love that. Great
like
breakdown.
A Michael Mayer is kind of someone that comes to mind where I could, if everything goes right, that guy could be the number 2 option in Las Vegas.
Yeah, because look, Irv Smith is probably going to have a game or two this year where he scores 2 touchdowns, just because that's how the NFL works. But it's not the kind of thing that you can bank on each week. And so you're never going to feel good about starting him. Maybe in a best ball league, he has some appeal.
I was just going to say that. He's an interesting best ball play. But for redraft, he's somebody I'm not super interested in.
100%. Okay, anything else on the Bengals before we wrap them up, Rob?
No, I think we hit the main guys. I think, to take note, we were talking about Joe Mixon a little bit. They brought in Orlando Brown to shore up that offensive line. I think that's something that's not talked about enough. If this offensive line can kind of take a step forward, and 1, it's good for Joe Burrow, and 2, it's really good for Joe Mixon.
Yep, 100%. Okay, let's move on to the Ravens. Starting with Lamar Jackson, the bag man himself, Mr. Moneybags, going currently in round 4 of fantasy drafts this year. Are you feeling you're fading Lamar at his current ADP of mid-round 4?
Yeah, I'm feeling that at 4. Like we talked about Joe Burrow going in the 3rd. I'd much rather have Lamar Jackson in the 4th, just with that rushing upside. I mean, you're going to get a really safe floor. There's a lot of talk this season with the offensive coordinator, Todd Monken, coming in, that there should be more passing attempts for Lamar Jackson. And if he can get to those, 2019 numbers, get 30 plus touchdowns. I mean, he was averaging over 28 points per game in that season. He could get to those numbers, and that's a league winner in the 4th round. He could put up those numbers, that you're taking for Josh Allen and Jalen Hurts in round 2. You can get him two rounds later. So at that ADP, if my draft is falling right to me, I'd take him there.
Yeah, I think the thing this year, at least that I've sort of sussed out in drafts, is that there's a big cliff after round 3. Once we get past the Joe Mixons and Aaron Jones and we start looking at guys like Miles Sanders, there's a big drop off there. And so, you love Miles Sanders?
Pump your brakes. I'm a Miles Sanders stan this year. He is one of my flag plant players that I am trying to get in every draft. Me and Andrew Cooper, we both love him this season. I think he's going to be somebody that could be special, but I understand what you're saying. Those middle rounds this year really seems to fall off a cliff, and it's tough to find value. That's why taking, we're talking about it, right? Taking a quarterback in the top 4 rounds, it's tough this year, just because it gets so thin after, the 6th round.
Yeah, 100%. But if you can go with Lamar, to your point, if you can go with Lamar Jackson in the 4th round, then it affords you the ability to, in the 2nd round, go with somebody like an Amon-Ra St. Brown or like a Chris Olave or a Tony Pollard even, or Derrick Henry. Like, if you can have Derrick Henry and Lamar Jackson, I'd much rather have that. Personally, this is just my take. I'd much rather have that than Jalen Hurts and Miles Sanders. So
I'm with you.
Yeah. So that's my take 100%. There. I think totally feeling Lamar at that ADP of round 4. Moving on to his running mate, J.K. Dobbins, also going in the late 4th, early 5th. Are you feeling or fading J.K. Dobbins at his current ADP?
Yeah, he's one of those guys. He's going right around Miles Sanders, right?
Yeah.
So I typically go for Miles Sanders. That's the way I've been drafting. But I do like J.K. this season. I mean, when the guy's on the field, he's uber efficient. He's, I think, career average over 6 yards per carry. Now the one knock on him is he's paired with Lamar Jackson, right? Those red zone rushes aren't going to be there as much as there is with Miles Sanders. He's not going to get as many pass opportunities just because we have a rushing quarterback. We know the underlying metrics with rushing quarterbacks and how they don't like to use their running backs in the pass game. So JK, he's got all the potential. Someone brought this up to me. Somebody called him like Nick Chubb light. He might not get a ton of pass work, but he's so good on the ground that he can make up for it. I think JK is that good. It's just, is he going to stay healthy? 2, is he going to be happy enough? Because he's been very vocal about how unhappy he is in Baltimore. Yeah. And, is he going to get the touchdown? Like, he has to perform in the touchdown category. He needs to get 12 plus touchdowns to catapult himself into that, RB15, that RB15 world where he's being drafted. I'm kind of fading him just because there's a lot that has to go right for J.K. Dobbins this season.
Paris, what do you think? She agrees. I don't like J.K. Dobbins either, Paris. You got to get down, sweetie. I don't want you to get hurt. Yeah, J.K. Dobbins is one of those guys where I was so in on him last year. I thought he was going to bounce back from the injury, but I don't know, man. I don't think he looked like his former self. And to be fair, I think a lot of that could be due just to psychology, right? Like, he came back from pretty gruesome injury. Mm-hmm. He's not going to feel 100% planting and bursting off of that leg. Yeah. So we could definitely see a bounce back. I love your assessment of him as like the Nick Chubb light.
Just to go off of what you're saying, mm-hmm. They rushed him back where he wasn't ready, right? He played, I think, weeks 3 through 6, or 3 through 4, if I'm not mistaken. Played those games, didn't feel right. Then he got his knee cleaned out, came back the last 6 weeks of the season. In 4 of those weeks, he was averaging maybe 12 or 13 rushes a game, but he was getting over 100 yards. He was getting into the end zone. So if he can, put up that production where he was getting 6.5, 7.5 yards per carry in those weeks and get some touchdowns, if he plays a full season and you extrapolate that, I think he should be getting 15 to 17 rushes a game. That's kind of where I have him statted out. And with those numbers, he could catapult himself into, top 15 category, RB2 high upside. But like I said, there's a lot of risk with this guy. There's just a lot swirling around him it makes me uncomfortable.
Yeah, but look, we're in the 4th round, we're in the 5th round. You're not going to feel too comfortable about a lot of these guys. But he could be one of these league winners, right? Where you start and you do really well in your first 3 rounds, and then you grab JK in the 4th, and you all of a sudden have another quote unquote stud on your lineup, and you have that 4th stud, and that's what wins your league. He's got that kind of upside. He just has a pretty scary floor too. Moving on to one of my favorite players in NFL history, and we may disagree on this because of his time in Cleveland.
I loved him here. I did.
Good.
Didn't end the right way.
As a Giants fan, I loved him too. I literally cried. I shed a tear when we traded him. It's Odell Beckham. For those of you who
I shed a tear when we traded for him, so we had that in common. We were crying at the same time.
Feeling or fading his current ADP round 11. So are you feeling or fading Odell's current ADP at round 11? Okay.
I'm fading Odell this season. I can't get on board. I don't think I just don't think he has anything left. He already kind of came out and said this is going to be his last go round. This is going to be his last season. He's putting everything on the table. He's going to see where it lands at the end of the year, and if he wants to come back, he will. But he's going into this season thinking that it's going to be his last year. And when a player says that to me, it makes me think he's not in love with the game anymore. Something's going on. Like I just don't think his heart's going to be fully in this season. If you look at, I want to say, Vegas odds on his over-unders and stuff like that, they haven't pegged it like 600 yards, so they know something that's going on. Then you got to compete with Mark Andrews, Zay Flowers, Rashod Bateman, and Lamar Jackson running around. Lamar wanted Odell to come here. He went out, made sure that this organization made it a priority to get Odell. It's just, does he have anything left in the tank? And I'm not willing to bet, even at, in the 11th round. I think there's better upside plays than Odell.
Yeah, I look at the money they gave him, and I have a hard time believing that he's not going to be a big part of the. He got paid the same amount as DeAndre Hopkins, 13 mil. So, I'm not.
I get it. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm not banking on it by any means, like a good season from Odell. But round 11, I'm feeling him at that ADP. I think he's got the upside. It's just an opportunity cost at that point. So another guy who's going in a similar spot there, Zay Flowers, current ADP at the 13th round. Rob, you feeling or fading Zay Flowers at his ADP?
See, I'm feeling that. So that's where we're kind of like, I'd much rather take a swing on a rookie wide receiver coming into this offense, coming in excited, ready to go. I think he's got a lot of potential. I really liked his college film. They used high draft capital on the guy. So that's where I'm saying, you're bringing in the first round receiver. I think I'm going to go with the young wide receiver that has first round draft capital, even over the older vet that's getting 13 mil.
Yeah, I think that's a smart way to look at it. And the draft capital thing is something I've sort of have been more receptive to over the past couple of years. It's just a data point that's pretty tried and true. Look, Zay Flowers has the ability to be sort of more than just a receiver in this offense. He can be sort of the gadget guy, if you will, but even more than just a gadget guy. Like, he could be somebody that gets some rushing attempts each week, and some end arounds and things like that. So I'm feeling Zay Flowers at that current ADP as well. If you go with Lamar Jackson, in round 4, I love the idea of stacking him with Zay Flowers in round 13.
100%. That's if I get Lamar, that's the guy I'm targeting. I'd probably even take a swing on him in the 11th just to make sure that I get him in the 12th, just to make, like, I'd go a round or two early, because at the same, what's the difference from round 11 to 13 realistically? Odell or Zay? Like, give me Zay. I'll take him in the 11th. I'll use that extra capital and make sure I get the guy that I really want to get, even if it's a round or two early.
I love it. Good take, man. Okay, so moving on to Mark Andrews. Current ADP, roughly early 3rd, late 2nd. Some, it depends on how your draft shakes out. But are you feeling or fading Mark Andrews at that round 2, round 3 ADP?
Yeah, he's going right at that 2-3 turn. That's where you see him going all the time. I love it. I'm actively trying to get him at that 2-3 turn if I can. He's one of those league-winning tight ends. It's him and Kelsey, right? That's about all you can bank on. We know you can say, Kyle Pitts or Tyler Hawkinson, or TJ Hawkinson, but it's Mark Andrews, and it's Mark Andrews as the top receiving option in this offense. He's going to get 120 plus targets, especially if they're throwing more. He had, I want to say, a 28% target share in this offense, which is elite for a wide receiver, not just a tight end. That's elite numbers. He gets a good amount of the air yard share. I am in on him at ADP. Is it going to surprise you if he's the tight end 1 overall next season? Maybe a little bit, but not to, I wouldn't think twice about it if he ended up being that tight end number 1 over Kelsey. And he again, man, you can get him 2 round or a full round later than Kelsey, round or 2 later. Like, give me that ADP.
Food for thought. Mark Andrews, only 1 season with 850 receiving yards or more.
If they're throwing more this season, it could, well, we're talking PP or PPR, right? Like, he's just going to eat those receptions up, and he's going to get those touchdowns. We know what's going to happen. Lamar finds him all the time. That's his go-to guy. Kelsey is an outlier where he's unbelievable. He's probably the best to ever do it. But give me Andrews 2 rounds later.
Yeah, I feel that. I definitely feel that. Lastly, moving on to Zay Flowers, Rashod Bateman. Any interest there, Rob, or are you just kind of out on Rashod Bateman at this point?
I mean, there's interest. All the underlying numbers are really promising when he's on the field. It's just they clearly view him as not the guy, right? They went out, they spent the first round pick on Zay Flowers. They went out, they got Odell Beckham Jr. Everything that this team is saying is Bateman's not our guy. So I think, again, it's give me Zay Flowers is the one receiver I want in this offense. And, I'll bring this one up too, that I was talking to Hutchinson Brown, a young, real up and coming guy in the fantasy football world, that I had him on talking Ravens. And he said something to me that really clicked. He said, what if, this Baltimore Ravens wide receiver room is how Kansas City's has been the past 2 seasons, where there's not really a guy. There's not a guy to own in that wide receiver room. They're each going to have their games. All of them are going to get theirs, but it's never going to pan out into fantasy relevant players. It's just going to be a mishmash of week in and week out. Someone else is doing it differently. And that's something that I really took that. I was like, you know what, man, that's a great point, because I might be fading all these receivers at ADP, but if I had to choose one, I'm probably taking Zay.
100%. I feel that. Okay, so second to lastly, the team down south, we refer to them as the Pittsburgh Steelers. We don't like the Pittsburgh Steelers here in Cleveland.
We do not like those Pittsburgh Steelers.
Could you give me just a quick blurb on why we don't like the Pittsburgh Steelers? I still have no idea. Is it just the proximity from towns? Because we're only like an hour and a half, 2 hours from Pittsburgh.
Yeah, it was just proximity, and there were back in when the Browns were actually good in the 70s and 80s, when we had the Cardiac Kid, stuff like that, there were some really, really tough games. There were some brutal hits that were going on. I mean, it turned into a bloodbath between the two teams, and the players hated each other. You saw it on the field, and when the players hate each other, the fans file suit, and they're, I was born, and my dad said, you're not going to be a Steelers fan, so I listened.
Well, can you be a Kenny Pickett fan? Current ADP, undrafted. I mean, this is another free square opportunity. Are you feeling or fading Kenny Pickett this year as a potential backup on your single QB teams, or potentially like that second quarterback in your super flex leagues?
Yeah, I think if I get one of the top tier quarterbacks, I'd be fine with having Pickett as my backup. There's nowhere else to go but up for this guy, right? He looked halfway decent. Like, eye test was pretty good. He just got no touchdowns, and there were a few games where the interceptions were a big issue. But if he can clean that up, if this offense can kind of evolve, take a step forward, if George Pickens can take a step forward, they get Dionate in the end zone. I mean, he had some terrible luck with the touchdowns, but if everything, I don't see where this. I've been talking about this. The Pittsburgh Steelers, I'm probably going to own a lot of Pittsburgh Steelers on my fantasy teams, because I think their ADP is so down, so below what it should be, just because of how off season they had last year. It was a really weird season for the offense. Like, it didn't make enough sense. So you're seeing it in the ADP right now with all these players. And I think they should all relatively outperform where they're going.
Might disagree on this next take then. Najee Harris, round 3 ADP. Feeling or fading Najee Harris in round 3? Okay.
Fading Najee. He's the one player that I can't get on board with. I mean, he has he's going to have the workload, right? He's going to have the workload, maybe. But in the third round, I'm not fully sold on it. He hasn't proven it to me. He's had the opportunity the first 2 seasons. He has a career under 4 yards per carry. I know he was dealing with that Liz Frank last season, had the metal plate in his foot, came back, looked a little bit better. But I can't get on board with Najee. I've seen enough where I'm not sold.
Yeah. I just don't love him from a talent perspective personally. I don't think he's anything.
Yeah, I'm with you.
I don't think he's anything incredibly special. And now maybe this is a good time to talk about Jaylen Warren going in the 13th round. I personally think Jaylen Warren's a pretty damn good player, Rob. Maybe he's not quite the same player as Najee, but maybe he is. I don't know. I really like Jaylen Warren, currently going in the 13th round. You feeling or fading Jaylen Warren at his current ADP?
I'm feeling that. I think, if Najee gets off to a slow start again and doesn't look great, like, we could see a lot more Jaylen Warren down the back half of the season. We saw him last year in spurts, and he looked really good. He was super efficient on the ground. He was good in the pass game. Now, is Tomlin going to do it? I don't know. But I think in the 13th round, it's worth a flyer because, again, you see what you watch over the first month of the season, what's going on, how much Warren's getting on the field. Is he getting used in the pass game? If everything's saying no, he's not getting used, you can dump him for free. Like, it's nothing.
Mm-hmm.
But if he is, you can hang on to him and hope that Najee falls off a cliff because it's a realistic possibility.
Real quick digression here. Round 13, your team is pretty balanced in terms of running backs and receivers. You're staring down the barrel of Jaylen Warren and Zay Flowers. Who are you taking?
Give me Zay. In PPR, Give me Zay. I think he has he's got a clear path to being the wide receiver 1 on that team. You know, Warren's got an uphill battle to being the RB2 and getting solid work as an RB2. Just because we know Pittsburgh's MO is usually use one running back and run them till the wheels fall off. And that's what they've been doing with Najee. Now, again, if Najee's just not producing and they want to see what they have with Warren, it could switch quickly. But I think Zay's got a clear path to being that wide receiver 1 and getting a ton of work early.
Gotcha. I love it. Okay, moving on to Dionate Johnson, currently going in the 7th round according to ADP, a guy that scored, as we all know, 0 touchdowns last year. Are you feeling or fading a bounce back for Dionate Johnson and willing to take him there in round 7?
Yeah, man, I'm feeling it. Like, let's look at his last 3 seasons. He's had 147 targets, 169 targets, 144 targets. He was wide receiver 8, 2 seasons ago. Like, we're trying to throw this guy, in the back saying, hey, he's nothing anymore just because he had one bad season with a rookie quarterback that didn't look all that great. He still got his targets. He's good enough to demand that target share, and he's getting it. So I don't see that changing. I think he's going to get upwards of 150 targets again this season. And, touchdowns are the hardest thing to predict year in and year out. So 0 last year was such an outlier. You got to imagine the guy's going to get at least 4 or 5. And if he gets 4 or 5, he's up into, he's probably going to be he would have been wide receiver 30 last year, something like that. So if he continues his numbers, which he, by all accounts, he should, he's going to outperform his ADP.
Yep. I love Dionate Johnson. I also think that he is one of the other interesting buy lows in Dynasty as well. I know we talked about Keenan Allen on your show just before
Still young.
This. Yeah,
he's only,
26?
Yeah, 26. He'll be playing 27 this year.
Yep.
The dude has an elite target share in an offense, and if you can get that in the 7th round, it's a no-brainer.
Yeah, and it's a warranted target share too, Rob. Like he's 100%. Getting these targets because he gets open. It's not like they just, they feed him the ball for some reason. He's open on every play. Ben Roethlisberger said this guy could get open in a telephone booth before he retired. He's just so good. Yeah,
he's gotten better every single year. We don't really know last year just because of how, off that whole offense was as a whole, but there was all those talks early in his career about drop passes. The guy can't hold on to the ball. And then he cleans that up. And then he becomes a wide receiver 8. Like he has the potential to break into that top 15 wide receiver. Drafted in the 7th round. Like, that's a steal.
All right, well, let's talk about his running mate, George Pickens, also going in the 7th round. Are you feeling or fading George Pickens at his current ADP of the late 7th round?
Yeah, he's a very tricky one for me. I think it kind of depends on the makeup of your team. I like where they're both going in the 7th. It just depends on, are you looking for a home run swing, George Pickens, or are you looking for a safe floor with Dionate? George Pickens has the ability and upside of, producing as a top wide receiver. He has proven that he can be that kind of player when given the opportunity. Now, is Dionate going to command too much of the offense? Probably. But he's one of those players that can do it on a, 115, 120 targets if this offense is passing a little bit more, which I think they're going to because this defense isn't going to be as good as it has been in the past. Like, they're going to be playing from behind a lot this season. So, in my opinion. Now, if they're playing from behind in the second half, they're going to be chucking the ball. They're probably going to go to their deep option, George Pickens. He's kind of that guy that can fly down the sideline, make circus catches, get in the end zone. Like, he's that kind of player. So where he's going, again, if I have safe wide receivers that I'm super comfortable with, like if I have 3 wide receivers I'm really comfortable with, I'm going to take a swing on the upside with George Pickens. Now, if I have 2 safe ones and one that's kind of an upside play, I think I'd probably go Dionate with the safe floor.
I love that. That's a great breakdown, man. Totally agreed. I think George Pickens, hasn't shown enough to me to want to be feeling him like in a big way at that ADP. I'll probably miss out on him this year in pretty much every draft until I got to see it with him first. But obviously a great ball skills at the high point of the pass, and just somebody who has the potential to score 10 plus touchdowns, even though it's probably not likely. He's got that upside in a way that probably Dionate doesn't. So I
that's
think
a good way to
breakdown
put
is
it,
spot
right?
on.
I mean, he was number 3 last year in average depth target. He had 28 deep targets in an offense that really didn't throw the ball too much, last year. He's just kind of that down the field threat that can go up and make the play. And like you said, he's probably the only receiver on this team that has that 10 plus touchdown upside.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, 57.1 contested catch rate too, which was 13th best in the league last year. Yeah. So, dude can obviously, go up and get the ball in a way that maybe 12 other players can.
Mm-hmm.
But
you're right.
We'll see. The ADP is a little bit too much for me, but we'll see. Okay, last guy in the Steelers here, Pat Freiermuth, going in the 8th round currently. Very interesting player this year for fantasy because I think he might be the 3rd option on the pecking order for the receiving. Pat Freiermuth, somebody a lot of people are pretty excited about Pat Freiermuth this year, both for redraft and dynasty. His current ADP though, going in the 8th round. Are you feeling or fading Pat Freiermuth this year, Rob?
I'm feeling it, man. Going in the 8th round, he's one of the tight ends that I could see have his breakout season. We usually get it 3 or 4 seasons into these tight ends. He's coming into his 3rd year. He went from 79 targets to 98 targets. His yards per reception went from 8 to 11 with Kenny Pickett going in there. So I think the sky is kind of the limit for him. Like, do I expect him to be a top 5 tight end? No, but can I see it? Yeah, I really could. He has outproduced what a lot of people have kind of thought. He has the skills. He has the ability. If he gets the opportunity, that's the big question. Are they going to give him the opportunity with these other 2 stud wide receivers on the outside? I kind of think the way it's going to go is Freiermuth will take over Pickens, the number 2 in the pecking order over Pickens. I think it's going to go Dionate, Freiermuth, Pickens. But I love him at ADP. I took him in the fishbowl. I'm taking him in a lot of drafts this season.
Smart man. We're big Pat Freiermuth guys here on this podcast and on this show. I have him in pretty much every league. I love Pat Freiermuth this year, and it's very reassuring, Rob, to hear you do too.
Oh yeah, and as a Browns fan, I hate saying it, but he had 403 unrealized yards, which was number 4 over tight ends. I mean, he was thrown at a ton, 98 targets. Like, he can get up into that 110, 120 targets, and then we're talking something serious with a tight end.
100%. Okay, so any other things that we missed on the Steelers here before we move on to the hometown heroes?
I don't think so. I think we hit most of the players that are going to be relevant this season.
Cool. All right, so let's do it. Let's close it out here with the Brownies, man. Deshaun Watson, obviously, off the field stuff aside, super interesting from a fantasy perspective because in his first 3 years in the league, he finished top 5 in each of those years. As a quarterback.
I think let's break it down. 2020, he was QB5 in points per game. 19, he was QB2 in points per game. In 2018, he was QB5. And they were all 21 points or more in each season, and they grew every year. He got more and more. So he's a super interesting play this year.
So you feeling him or fading him at his current ADP, round 8?
I'm feeling him. I'm feeling him. I think his ADP is, of course. I mean, I honestly, this could just be some Browns homerism, but you don't forget how to be a really good quarterback. You just don't forget it. Like, he came in last season, traded, has all the off the field issues. He's coming off a full season and a half of not playing competitive football. He barely had a training camp, going into a new offensive system. What did we expect? Did we think this guy was going to come in and be a top 5 quarterback right off rip? I didn't. I was saying that last year to everybody in Cleveland. Like, let's temper our expectations. It's probably going to be a bumpy ride. And there's a guy I follow, Jake Burns. He has a Browns podcast. He's one of my favorite breakdown. He does the X's and O's breakdown of the Cleveland Browns, and he's one of my favorite people doing it. He broke down that the first game Deshaun Watson was back was against the Texans. Now, they ran a ton of RPOs in that game. Okay, out of the gun RPOs. The offensive line wasn't ready for it. They didn't know how to block it. They didn't know how to block with a mobile quarterback back there doing an RPO system. The wide receivers weren't comfortable. So what the coaching staff did in the rest of the games moving forward into the season, which was Deshaun Watson's last 5 games, they went completely back to how Kevin Stefanski was calling the plays with Jacoby Brissett. That's not Deshaun Watson's game. This whole offseason has been dedicated to completely flipping this offense to an RPO-based gun system where they're going to throw the ball a lot more than people are anticipating, in my opinion. And I think that's going to make for a really, really interesting season for Deshaun Watson this year.
I'm totally feeling Deshaun at that current ADP as well. Going off the board as the 9th quarterback, there's not a lot of wiggle room for another season like we had last year. If it's last year again, then he's not worth it at that price, of course. But the upside is there. Like we talked about Lamar Jackson earlier being one of those guys that could return similar production as Jalen Hurts and as Pat Mahomes and as Josh Allen. Deshaun Watson has that upside too, and you're paying obviously less for that because of last year compared to Lamar Jackson, but I think he has that same upside as those other guys. I don't know if you agree with that, Rob.
Oh, 100%. I think he has all the upside to get back into the top 5 category. That's how good he is. That's the weapons around him are some of his best that he's had in his career. And I think something that's not being talked about enough with Deshaun Watson is he can still run the ball. He's going to get his in the rush game. I think he'll get upwards around 500 yards. Now, that's going to be a lot of scramble. It's not going to be by design, but look, he has all the ability to scramble for about 400 to 500 yards, which is massive in fantasy, and find the end zone a couple times. So I do think sky's the limit for him this year. People are just, I completely understand where the whole community and everyone is on the off the field stuff, and no one really wants to touch him. That's more of that's more of the ADP is people just don't want to touch him based on moral issues, which is 100% your right to do. This is your fantasy.
You probably could have phrased that better, Rob.
You think?
Yeah.
No, let's redo it then.
No, I was kidding. You just said a lot of people don't want to touch him. I was just making a really poor joke there. But
I was like, oh shit, did I say something wrong?
No.
No, yeah, people don't want to draft him just based off of moral principle, which is you're right as a fantasy football manager, 100%. You go get the people that you want to root for. That's how it should be. Go root for your players that you draft. And if you don't want to draft him, that's 100% fine. But I think that is getting baked into his ADP because as a player, he should be getting drafted higher. I understand last year wasn't good, but again, what did we expect?
Yeah. All right. Well. In the interest of not turning this into the Deshaun Watson hour, let's move on to some of his running mates. I definitely agree though. I'm hitting draft at Deshaun Watson's round 8 ADP every time. Let's move on to Nick Chubb. One of my favorite players, frankly, of the past few years in fantasy. Nick Chubb currently going off the board in the late 1st, early 2nd round. Are you feeling or fading Nick Chubb at his current ADP?
Feeling. How can you not? The guy is a all-time rushing running back. He is one of the best players we've seen in a long. It's him and Derrick Henry, right? Those are going to be the 2 running backs coming out of this generation that are going to get into the Hall of Fame. Probably first ballot Hall of Famers. They're that good. He's done nothing but produce. He's had over 5 yards per carry in every single season. Found the end zone 13 times last year, and he kind of fell off a cliff at the back half of the year and still finished running back 6 when Deshaun Watson came in, and the offense kind of stalled as a whole. Now, if this offense can kind of keep its pace, which I think it will this year, there's no reason he can't be the running back number 1 overall. That's kind of the stand that I'm putting on it is I think he is going to be easily within the top 5 running backs and probably has a real chance of being RB number 1 overall. Kareem Hunt's not there anymore, so he's not going to really be sharing time with anybody. I know Jerome Ford is around, but I really don't think he's going to have any issues with that. I think Nick Chubb's still going to get over probably the most touches of his career with 320 to 330 rushes. If he gets over that 5.5 yards per carry, which he probably should, and the offense is takes a step forward and he keeps getting those touchdowns, this guy could be RB1 easily.
I'll just say this about Nick Chubb. If somebody took him at 101, even in a full PPR league, I wouldn't be that mad. That's all I'll say.
I think
he's a great player.
He is.
I think he's
I think,
a stud.
again, it's something they're going to be in the gun a lot, which Nick Chubb was. His efficiency numbers out of the gun when running the ball were staggeringly good.
Mm-hmm.
Now, he's also going to get a lot more run in the pass game that I don't think people want to admit. Like, I think we've seen Nick Chubb enough over the last few years where we're like, he's only going to get 30 targets. I don't think so. I think we're going to see a lot of targets come his way. And Deshaun Watson knows how good of a player he is. He'll find him the ball.
100%. Okay, moving on to the receiving core here for the Brownies. Amari Cooper currently going in the late third. Are you feeling or fading Amari Cooper in the late third round?
Yeah, I'm still feeling it. I think there's some interesting options around there where I definitely think it would have to fall to me in the right way for me to take Amari that high. But he had a 26.1% target share, which was top 20, a 38.3% air yard share, which was 7th in the NFL. Those numbers are very, very good for me. Again, I think this offense is going to go more pass happy, more into the gun. Deshaun Watson really likes to utilize his number one receiver. We've seen that over his career, and that's going to be Amari Cooper this year. So if Amari Cooper can keep that target share and air yard share at 38.3%, which is very, very good, he can get into that top 12.
100%. I love Amari Cooper this year. A little rich for me. There's not a lot of kind of wiggle room there at that ADP. I'd rather take a guy like Joe Mixon, but I think I'm neutral.
Is he going around like Calvin Ridley?
Yeah, he's going around.
That's right.
He's going ahead of Calvin Ridley. So
give me
you'd rather
Amari
have
all
Amari
day.
Cooper.
All day.
I feel that. I mean, great player. It just feels. We talked about this on your show, Rob. But like, once he gets towards the back end of round 3, it feels real greasy, really fast. And so I'm just, It's probably the right price for Cooper, but it just doesn't feel great.
Yeah.
Let's talk about some guys that do feel a little bit better at their ADP. One of my favorite players, and I'm really happy that y'all got him, Elijah Moore, currently going off the board in the 9th round. Are you feeling or fading Elijah Moore at his current ADP?
Elijah Moore is another one of my breakout candidates this season. Yeah. I think he's going to have an amazing season. He's talked a ton about getting traded, the Browns trading for him, and him feeling welcomed and wanted in a system. He said he's completely rejuvenated and really wants to get into this season and play some football. Now I'm going to steal this from Jeff Bell, one of my favorite fantasy analysts out there. The back half of his rookie season, we know he kind of went on a streak, right? 6-game stretch in 21 where he was on pace for 96 receptions, 1,300 yards, and 14 touchdowns. That is insane. That's insane numbers that you can draft in the 9th round. Now, do I expect those numbers to come to fruition this season? No, not at all. But he's proven that he has the ability to sustain those stats over a long stretch. 6 games isn't nothing, right? Like that's a long enough stretch for me to be like, okay, he can sustain this stuff. So with how this offense is going to evolve, I think the coaching staff has already come out and said they're going to utilize him in a ton of different ways. He's being lined up in the backfield, slot, outside. They're going to get him mismatched against the defense. He's going to feast in this offense, and I cannot wait to see what happens.
Yeah, I mean, they're projecting, or at least the buzz in training camp is that he's going to be involved in the backfield also.
Which is super interesting because, again, we talked about it. No Kareem Hunt, right? Kareem Hunt's gone. That was their pass catching. I think Nick Chubb will be involved more than what he has been, but I think they're also going to utilize a lot of Elijah Moore back there in some gimmicky ways, get him the ball in a lot of unique, creative situations where we've seen him, right? He can take a ball and he can go and find the end zone easily. He is, again, one of my breakout candidates. He's one of the guys I'm trying to get in every draft this season.
I love that, man. Okay, so another player that you may or may not be trying to get in every draft this year, David Njoku, going off the board in the 9th round. You feeling or fading David Njoku at that ADP?
Yeah, I love the player. I really do.
Homer.
It's hard for me. I think there's better options just because I'm so high on the other guys. Like, I'm super high on Cooper. I think he's going to demand a ton of this target share, and I think Elijah Moore is as well. Now, Njoku will probably be the number 3 fiddle in this offense and should be involved a lot in the red zone. So that could prop him up with touchdowns. But again, we've talked about it. Touchdowns are so hard to lay your hat on, right? Like, you can't bank on touchdowns because you don't know year in and year out. Like, you want to see the volume. And I just don't know if the volume's going to be there this year with all the other weapons around him.
Yeah, I think that's a fair take. I haven't drafted Njoku really in many places this year, and it's exactly to your point, Rob. We just don't know. It's almost a little bit like the Freiermuth thing where, he might be the second option. We don't know. It's kind of up in the air. But I think Freiermuth, from a talent perspective, might just be a little bit better than Njoku and maybe command more targets and more volume.
Yeah.
But they feel like they're both kind of in. Yeah, they both kind of feel like they're in the same mix there. As if you're missing out on one of the guys at the top of the draft, and it's getting late, and one of these guys is falling on the board, then you should feel good about picking them up as your later tight end. But don't expect the world by any means. I think it's a fair way.
I don't hate it. I don't hate the pick. I don't hate the player because I still think he's going to have a nice season. I just think that we just talked about Freiermuth. They're probably going right around the same area. I think Freiermuth has a clear path to being that tight end or the receiving option number 2 in this offense. For Njoku, it's a little bit harder for me to see that because he's dealing with Elijah and DPJ. Amari Cooper's already solidified himself as the wide receiver 1, the receiving option number 1 in this offense. Now he's going to be dealing with DPJ and Elijah Moore, which I don't see him beating out, especially Elijah, and he could be the 4th or 5th option in this offense.
100%. All right, so one last guy that I want to touch on because I need your take. I need your expert opinion as a Browns fan. I couldn't be higher on Jerome Ford this year. I love this guy. When we were at the Fantasy Football Expo last year, I was on one of the panels where they talked about, we were talking about sports betting and whatnot, and they asked for our best bet of the year, and I said Jerome Ford Rookie of the Year. You can't find it anywhere, but it's just nobody's thinking about him. He was a 5th-round draft pick. But dude balled out at Cincinnati, man. I think he's a great player. I think he looked pretty good as a return guy last year in terms of finding the right creases to go up. Shows a lot of burst, shows some power. You can tell I'm stammering. I can't be more high on Jerome Ford this year. So am I crazy or am I onto something?
Let me break this down in a couple segments, right? I think you're onto something.
Okay.
I do think he's a very good talent. I think he's a really, really interesting and good talent because, I mean, I dig deep into Brown's Twitter. I dig deep into, I listen to all the interviews after Nick Chubb's come out. He said Jerome Ford is a very, very good back. He personally went out of his way to bring up Jerome Ford and how good he is. The running backs coach, same thing, talks about how good Jerome Ford is. You can tell that this team is in on Jerome Ford because it's Nick Chubb, and then they didn't bring anybody else in when they let Kareem Hunt go, right? Mm-hmm. So that's how you know a team is behind you when they don't even go out and get somebody when they let I don't want to say top talent, but they let Kareem Hunt walk, and they're saying, Jerome, you're up. This is your time to go. Now, for this season, I'm a little skeptical just because I truly think they're going to make it a point to win this year. I think they're going to put all their chips in the table and say, we're riding Nick Chubb till the wheels fall off this year. For me, I think he's going to have the most touches of his career easily. And I think Jerome Ford will get in and look good. But for fantasy purposes, I don't think he's going to be too special. Now, in Dynasty, he's somebody I'm actively trying to trade for because I could see them either moving on from Nick Chubb next year or the year following. And then it's going to be the Jerome Ford show.
I think that's a really pragmatic way to look at it and not emotionally charged.
But I love it. I hope you're right.
Yeah, I mean, look.
I hope you're right.
I think that's a great way of looking at it. Like Nick Chubb, correct me if I'm wrong, but he's wrapping up his rookie contract, so
he already signed his second season or his second contract. So I think they have an out after this season where it's not going to be too much of a hit. Now, if he has a great season like we both kind of anticipate, it's going to be really hard to move on from him. But again, he's 20. He's going to play his 28-year season. That's getting up there, even though we've seen these running backs kind of longevity a little bit better, kind of closer to the 30-year mark. So I'm anticipating another year or two of really good Nick Chubb seasons, but it's getting up there, right? It's getting to that point where it's like, okay, who's going to be our guy behind him? And it seems like it's going to be Jerome Ford.
Okay, so let's wrap it up with this. I think we're both on the same page that Jerome Ford, not somebody that we're expecting to have a big year necessarily outside of a Nick Chubb injury, God forbid. So if you draft Nick Chubb, go draft Jerome Ford in your redraft leagues as a good handcuff. And then in your dynasty leagues, try and get him now before the price gets out of hand. Cool.
Yep.
All right, dude. Anything else on the Browns? Super Bowl or bust this year, it sounds like?
Yeah, I mean, the only player to kind of tag on is Donovan Peoples-Jones. I mean, I think he is somebody to monitor. It's, again, there's a lot of mouths to feed, but he's going to be that deep field threat that if Watson kind of connects with him like Will Fuller, I could be completely wrong, and he is that breakout candidate instead of Elijah Moore.
100%. I like DPJ a lot, too. I have him on my dynasty lineups, so we'll see if it pans out. Rob, appreciate you so much for coming on, man. This has been a great conversation. You're a great dude to hang out with in general, a great dude to talk football with. Before we head out, tell everybody where they can find you and tell everybody a little bit about Dad Bod Fantasy Squad.
Yeah, man, you can find me on Twitter at DadBodFS. It's 6 of us. We go live every Monday, Wednesday, Thursday, 9 to 10 Eastern to talk some fantasy football. You can catch us at Twitter, or I'm sorry, I already said that. We're on YouTube, Twitch, iTunes, Spotify, Instagram, TikTok, all at Dad Bod Fantasy Squad. We have some really cool stuff coming up. Will, you're going to be a part of it. We have we're getting a guest from every single NFL team to come on and talk about a specific team. We're going to release them in 8 divisional episodes, and I'm really excited. We have fantasy experts like yourself, Dave Kluge. We have some ex-NFL players coming on. We have a ton of our OG fans from when we first started. So it's going to be a really good mix of different type of ideas and mindsets on these teams and how, we should view them for fantasy football. And I'm super excited.
I love it, dude. Keep up the great work. You guys are one of the shining stars in the industry, I think. Keep it up, brother.
Will, you're the man. I appreciate you.
Dude. All right, see you, Rob, and see you, everybody. Thank you all so much for listening. I know this has been our longest episode yet, but we're going to keep doing these, guys. We brought you the AFC North today. We'll see what division we bring next time, but before we sign off, I just want to say thank you all so much for being with us. Go ahead and hit that like and subscribe button. Be so kind to leave us a comment. Let us know what you thought of the show. And with that, we'll bid thee adieu. Thanks for watching the Better Fantasy Football Show. We'll see you next time.